So, Harold,
Yes.
you know me. I'm Dr. R, and we've known each other a while. And today we're going to talk about happiness and positivity and aging well. And when I thought about putting this video together, you were the first person I thought about because you're like the poster child for happiness, positivity, and aging well. I did want to tell you something before we start, that there are some women playing cards in the other room and they get a little noisy at times. So if you hear anything in the other room, we'll tell them to pipe down, but they shouldn't bother us any, okay?
Fine.
We're going to be here to talk about joyous living as we get older. As a physician, my career was to treat disabilities, but I also was very involved in helping people to prevent disabilities. I was a geriatric physician and a disability physician. And many of the disabilities that we deal with are entirely preventable. One of the major ways that we need to challenge ourselves as we age is to not get stuck in our ways, to continue to learn, to use our brains, to use our bodies, and not be afraid to seek happiness and laughter and joyfulness, especially as we're getting older. So, as I said, Harold's the poster child for all of those things. He's an amazing person. He's funny, he's happy, he's positive. Talk about a positive attitude. When my mother was in the nursing home, she used to say to me, "I've got a Swiss cheese brain, so now I can roll it up and make a sandwich." I used to go to that geriatrician, Dr. Liver Spot. He was always too positive. One time he's telling me about a drug he wants to prescribe for me. He said, side effects may include umbrellas growing out of your eyes. And then he said, but if you move to Seattle, that's a good thing. This is my affirmation potato. Positive Spud. Donna, you carry that thing around with you? Well, this is the 27th one I've had in my purse. They grow things. He doesn't let the little things in life get you down. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. You're very involved in the community. And you travel a lot with your dear wife, Sheila.
Yes.
So that's what I know. And I know that you're not afraid to try new things. You're not afraid of getting unstuck from patterns that we often get into as we get older. And you're not afraid to grow and expand as a person, which I really admire about you, truly admire about you. And I mean that. So I've told Harold this a number of times. Since I first met you, I've said that I want to be like you when I grow up.
Okay.
If I ever grow up. And I asked you here to talk about your approach to life, how you keep your brain and your body active, specifically because at 80 years old, Harold decided to try something new, totally new, and take on a big acting role. He had never acted before in his life, although you've given presentations and you've spoken in front of groups.
Yes.
But he didn't just go at taking a little minor part in a play. He took the biggest part in the play. In fact, when I met him, I was working with a theater group as a volunteer, and I found out from the artistic director that she had cast Harold, who had never acted before in his life, to play the part in a one-man show. To me, that's like climbing Mount Everest.
And tell me about it.
You've been a math teacher, so you had some presentation skills.
Yes.
You've done a lot of other things, which we'll get to in a moment, but I want to just ask you at first, now that I've given this big introduction, is when the artistic director first asked you if you would take this on, what were your first thoughts?
Well, she never told me what I was going to be doing. she invited me to breakfast. So I'm saying, okay, the Free Theater of Brevard, they probably want a check. No problem. We'll go have breakfast. I went to breakfast and I met Dr. Rubin. And she presented me with this script, sitting on the president's shoulder. I had no idea what it was about. I thought, well, okay, she wants me to participate in this opening production for the theater. I'll be one of the members of the cast, and I can get lost in this scenery and everything. And that's when she told me that you'll be the only character. And I said, okay. And I'm saying, I have no acting skills, no training. Yes, I've been on stage. I'm not shy. I'm extroverted. I'll do the best I can. And I'll let you know if I can't do it also. I'm not going to make a fool of myself or the script or the theater. Those were the things that were on my mind. And it was fun. I like doing things that are fun.
And that was probably what was the most amazing thing. You would think would be nerve-wracking doing something like that. And yet you always had this joyful, fun attitude from beginning to end. My grandson asked me, why are there grief groups and not happiness groups? I told him that's a really good question. Maybe we should start a national movement. Like I try to give people compliments and encourage happiness. Thank you, Barb. For what? For being you. You're much better at being you than most people. My physical therapist is in the positive feedback. Last time I saw her, she said I was drinking from this fountain of awesomeness. I told her, great, put that in your medical note. Because I worked with you, with the artistic director, the director, day in and day out. You worked for a couple of months to pull this off on looking over the president's shoulder. It's a 2-hour, 1.5 to 2 hour, one-man show. And this is months ago now that you performed this, and I still have people coming up to me in my neighborhood saying, Harold was amazing. You were amazing, and you pulled it off. But how did you feel about that when you were doing that, about how it makes you feel as a person once you had gotten to the point where you were able to complete the task?
Well, I read the entire script or so forth, and I was familiar with the story. And I had been to all of the places that they mentioned in the story. I've been to the White House, I've been to the East Room. Slightly familiar with the butlers and the cook stories in the White House. And looking over the president's shoulder, you're not really talking about anything that the president was doing. You was talking about his life. And that's all I thought about it. And everybody says I was the perfect person to be cast in this role. And after reading the script, I thought that also, because I was just familiar with the story. So I read it, and I've read it probably, I'd say 100, maybe 200 times. I don't know, because I read it every day, 3 and 4 times a day. So I morphed into this person. So when I actually did the play, I was this character. That's who I was.
Dr. Janet Rubin had told me that she cast you for the part because you had come and volunteered as an usher for the Free Theater. And she saw you and she thought, you looked so dignified, you looked like you would fit the role. That's what she told me. And I said, well, he's an usher, but can he act? And you showed us that you could. It was amazing. Now, you were a math teacher, but that was your first retirement. But what did you do before you retired?
Well, actually, math was my second career.
Okay, good. So let's talk about what you did earlier on in life.
My first career, I played with trains for 22 years. I started out as a conductor. I went into the control towers, which means I set up the routes around New York City, 4 of the 5 boroughs, because we don't go into Staten Island. And like I said, I was a conductor. I went into the control towers. Then I became what they call a yard master. That's where they lay the trains up and store them at night. We take them apart. Not we, they took them apart. It was my job to determine how to take them apart, where to put them, and so they can be repaired and inspected and put back together to be placed into service again the next morning. So probably the most important part of that job really was being a tower operator, learning the routes all over New York City. Whenever New York City never sleeps, for one thing, it's like 24/7, so it can never stop. You know, if there's a derailment, if there's a water main break, if there's a suicide or a collision, the trains have to continue moving. My job was to know how to move trains around New York City, no matter no matter what. One of my managers, when I first went into J Street, the headquarters, and he told me that being a tower operator, he said, I can teach anybody. I can teach a monkey how to move trains around, New York City. He says, what I need you for is when there's a problem, how to keep things moving. And so I went down to J Street. They took me down there, and I wrote up a lot of general orders and bringing trains, new sets of trains in from Japan, the Kawasaki trains, and floating them across the Hudson River and dragging them down the streets of Brooklyn into the Coney Island yard. And then they would distribute them out to the various divisions in the New York City Transit Authority. And that was one of the bigger projects that I did when I was in J Street, along with, allocating money and funds to run the division operations.
So you were doing a lot of management that it seems like would be incredibly stressful and challenging. Was it stressful to you at the time?
Not at all.
Why not? I mean, most people would take that as a pretty stressful kind of job.
I'm good at what I do. And when you know what you're doing, it's not stressful.
But it's also somewhat attitude, right? I mean, if a train derails and suddenly you got to get the commuters home.
That's exciting.
That's exciting to you.
Yes.
So then you did that for how many years? You worked?
22 years I worked for New York City Transit Authority. I've been retired 35 years. So that seems like a pretty good investment. One of the other biggest things that happened in New York City, I'm trying to think. Oh yes, I retired in 1991, June. There was a big derailment on 14th Street. One of the train operators, motorman, he was a little inebriated that evening, and he derailed a train going across a switch at 14th Street on the Lexington Avenue line, which was my section, my division that I controlled when I became a superintendent. That was one of the things. The other thing that I remember also was 9/11, when the towers were hit. And everyone was calling, trying to find me and my brother. My brother Roger was a bus operator, and his bus used to sit at the base of the World Trade Center. So they're calling us, trying to find out, where are they? Where are they?
Oh, wow.
And we were sitting in Kissimmee at Star Island Resort, which I sit on the board of that particular resort there. And we were having a glass of wine, getting ready to go to a board of directors meeting. And the first tower went down. I said, oh, well, these towers will never be 102 stories again, maybe 80, So we left the condominium. We went over to the office for the meeting that morning. By the time I got over to the meeting, everybody was saying, oh, 2 towers are down. I said, no. I said, only 1 tower got hit. They said, no, 2 towers. So when we got over there, we looked at the news, and everything had, imploded. Of course, thousands of people died that particular day. Very tragic, and those are some of the things I remember from my career. But I had retired in June, so 91, so this was 10 years after I retired.